Welcome, everyone, to Editors in Conversation. It's great to see so many of you, a lot of familiar faces out there. So I'm Elli Theel. I am an editor at JCM, and I co-host the monthly podcast, which, raise of hands, who listens to the Editors in Conversation podcast? Awesome! If you don't, you should. Lots of good stuff on there. So with me is my co-host, Dr. Alex McAdam from Boston Children's Hospital, also editor-in-chief for JCM. And Alex, I think your endless promotional tweeting did well. A lot of good number of people. Huh?
I do what I can.
Yes, you do. You do well. You do well. So before we get started, though, we need to thank the ASM technical support and all things podcast knowing guru, Ray Ortega, who's shaking his head, but he makes us look good and he makes us sound good. You know, you do the best with what you can. So thank you, Ray. Okay, so getting to the topic today.
Hang on.
Oh, we got stuff to say.
Well, there's a word in the script that I don't know. What is that?
Oh, autochthonous.
Autochthonous?
Yes. What do you think about that word?
Well, it looks like it's derived from ancient Greek to me. So, auto meaning self, tonic meaning earth or ground. So I suspect it probably refers to the ancient Athenian idea that the Athenians had risen from the earth and they were the true rightful inhabitants of their town. So I suspect it means something about local something.
Local
something?
Let's ask Ryan. Who attended Battle of the Brains today? Yes, we all learned a new word. Autochthonous means?
Autochthonous refers to the endemic transmission of an infectious disease, typically arbopathogens within a specific area. Autochthonous is in contrast to imported cases that people may have acquired outside of an area and then come in. So autochthonous means, like, for example, if there's autochthonous transmission of Zika virus in Houston, you would see the virus being transmitted among mosquitoes and people within Houston.
Is there a word for the opposite?
I just say imported cases.
Non-autochthonous.
Yeah, that's a good.
Or unautochthonous?
I think it's non. We'll go with non-autochthonous.
Not anti. All right.
Anti-autochthonous.
So.
Let's make something up.
Maybe we should meet our guests.
Yes. That was a very good hand over there. So before we meet our guests, though, I do want to say what our topic's going to be. But I think we all thought we could finally come up for air, maybe write some papers, submit to JCM, kind of do a stat or JCB. And kind of do, have a status quo moment. But that hasn't happened because we keep having viral outbreaks popping out. A lot of them have made the national news. And so the topic for today is viral outbreaks in the headlines. And we're going to have some fun talking about those. And to help us, we have our two guests here, experts in virology. We have Dr. Ben Pinsky, who is the director of Clinical Virology and a professor of Pathology and Medicine at Stanford Health Care and the Stanford University School of Medicine. And what?
The editor of?
Oh, and the editor of the Journal of Clinical Virology. And he does a great job. And then we have Dr. Ryan Relich, who is the Director of Clinical Microbiology and the Special Pathogens Unit Laboratory at IU Health and Eskenazi Health, and is an Associate Professor of Clinical Pathology and Laboratory Medicine at the Indiana University School of Medicine. So they're going to answer all of our questions. Okay, first topic, and I'm multitasking here. So, Mpox. So we actually just passed our first one-year anniversary of Mpox coming to the U.S. back in May. And we saw cases kind of peak in the late winter of last year, and they've really dramatically declined. So Ryan, do you want to tell us a little bit about where we're at with monkeypox cases in the U.S. right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back in time a little bit and sort of watch how monkeypox, or Mpox as it's known now, emerged in the United States. So really, chin, right, I forgot about the chin. So really cases started to be seen in May and June of last year. So exactly a year ago, we were seeing a spike in cases, and they sort of peaked at late summer, early fall, and then just sort of precipitously fell off. And we've seen over winter sporadic cases. I know in my laboratory we test for Mpox virus, and our specimen volume went from a dozen or so per week down to less than one every 2 weeks, and the ones that we did get were negative. But that's still the case in the state of Indiana, at least as far as I'm aware. However, right next door in Illinois, recently there was a resurgence in cases. There was an uptick in Mpox virus activity there. And so, the idea, I guess, is, there's a lot of folks out there who are now vaccinated against it. But one thing that's interesting, and I hope we could touch on this in a little bit, is, some of those cases are among the vaccinated, right? In individuals that received the Jynneos vaccine. But we are still seeing fairly low-level activity. However, public health agencies, clinical laboratories, dermatologists' offices, they're all sort of on alert for potential surges that may happen this summer. And, you may be asking yourself, well, why are you expecting surges? Well, a lot of the activities that are conducive to the transmission of Mpox virus seem to circle around large group activities.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those high-risk activities, for example, during the month of June and July, we may see lending themselves to more transmission of the virus.
So you kind of touched on this, but a lot of the cases in the Chicago outbreak, I think over 80% of them are occurring in vaccinated individuals. So do you want to talk a little bit about why that might be happening?
Yeah, to the best of my abilities. So, the Jynneos vaccine, none of the currently available vaccine platforms, right, are specifically target Mpox virus. They're vaccinia-based vaccines that you're really relying on sort of your closest neighbor virus to provide immunity against one of these. And it could just be, these viruses are just sort of slipping past that immunity. I think even with smallpox, the immunity was expected to only be between like 80 and 90%, something like that. And with Mpox virus, which is related, but it's not vaccinia, it's not variovirus. And so we're probably seeing that just as a consequence. Also, there could be other things that are influencing this. Perhaps many of those individuals who were susceptible to infection were immunocompromised. So perhaps they didn't even mount a protective immune response against Mpox virus. There's several potential explanations for why that's happening.
Awesome.
And another thing is too, sorry, I could go on about this, but there's...
No, you can't.
We only have 30 minutes.
All right, never mind. I'll stop talking.
Ben, let's turn it over to you. You had a session on lessons learned on Mpox earlier today. And for those who couldn't go, give us a few high points from that session.
Yeah, so I think there's some in the audience here who are in attendance, but we had an all-star cast, actually. In particular, Dime Ogona from Nigeria, who's the first individual to report sexual transmission of Mpox virus in the Nigerian outbreak in 2017, I believe, and who's also, I think, one of the 100 most influential scientists of 2022 as denoted by Time magazine. So really happy that he was able to join us and talk about the experience of Mpox in Nigeria and in Africa in general. And so this was really an amazing talk. I also spoke about diagnostic testing, primarily nucleic acid amplification testing for Mpox viruses, the various targets, and particularly focused on alternative specimen types such as oropharyngeal and anorectal samples, given the large number of, or at least some individuals that present with symptoms and signs and symptoms in those areas, but do not present with lesions or may develop lesions later. So this is an alternative specimen types that may be particularly useful for high-risk individuals, gay, bisexual men who have sex with men, who this outbreak has been primarily impacting to identify individuals that may be infected and not known. And then we had a really great talk from from the Saliva Direct folks who are looking at saliva as an alternative specimen type for Mpox diagnosis. So they presented some preliminary data and looked really interesting, and they're pretty good correlation actually of presence of viral DNA in saliva with patients that have lesions. So another potential alternative specimen for testing.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So that was topic number 1. Topic number 2, H5N1. So we heard a lot about H5N1 in the news the past year. Ben, do you want to bring us up to speed on some of the recent numbers? Are we seeing H5N1 and where and how is it transmitted?
Yeah, sure. So highly pathogenic avian influenza is of significant concern over the last year plus. It's been circulating in wild birds, waterfowl in particular, but other birds as well as farmed poultry. There's been actually the culling of over 100 million birds in Europe and the United States over the last approximately year. The primary virus that's responsible for this is an H5N1 in the 2344B clade. You guys don't need to memorize that. I had to refresh myself to make sure I remembered the right number.
There'll be a test.
Okay. And so this has spread. There's some interesting papers showing it spread from. I believe this is a Eurasian lineage that has been spread from Europe to Canada into the United States, and then waterfowl transmitting that throughout the United States. So a lot of concern about this virus. Fortunately, very limited number of human cases. Although this is a concern that the virus may spill over. Fortunately, avian influenzas use a different sialic acid linkages to get into cells that are primarily in birds and not in humans. So this may be protective, but obviously these viruses can evolve quite rapidly. So it's something we need to be vigilant about.
Yeah.
And Ryan, Ben mentioned that there had been a few human cases. Tell us a little more about the human cases and the potential for vaccination to prevent those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the World Health Organization, I believe their most recent data indicated that there was over 870 human cases of H5N1, the HPAI influenza A. But that goes, thank you, Elli, but that data started getting tracked back in 2003. This year, there have been a handful of human cases. And one thing that's especially scary about these cases is that there's approximately a 50% case fatality rate. So it's a very, very high CFR that's associated with these viruses. The good news is they're not incredibly contagious. People are not good at giving it to each other, thank goodness. The virus is not adapted to person-to-person spread. And like Ben had mentioned, the sialic acid that is really bound by the hemagglutinin spike is not what we carry up in our upper respiratory tracts. One big concern, though, is the potential for reassortment with other viruses that can use both alpha-2,3 and alpha-2,6 linked sialic acids, which would be not great. Then the virus would acquire the ability to more efficiently infect and presumably more efficiently spread. Perhaps there would be some opportunity cost associated with that too. Perhaps a loss in virulence or something to that effect, but we don't know. I mean, we have to do studies. We have to do gain of function studies, which, that's taboo to say that, I think, right? But with regard to vaccination, though, there is a lot of effort being put towards development of up-to-date vaccines. One of the things that we've had in our strategic national stockpile now for a very long time are H5N1 vaccines. There's 3 different platforms, and a couple of which, are probably still fairly effective. But these viruses evolve over time, and they were really designed using the hemagglutinins of the early 2000s. And so evolution has come a very long way since then. So who knows how effective those vaccines that we have in stockpile, using a roadmap from a virus that was many, many, many lineages, many generations ago, if that would still correlate with any type of protection these days.
Well, per NBC News, it says the vaccines are going to be ineffective.
Oh, well, that may be the case.
Yeah.
That's what experts say.
That's what
experts say, yeah.
The other option for vaccines, which some other countries do, is to vaccinate birds. So that may be a parallel approach to help protect both the birds and the humans from spillover.
And there's interest in doing that with a number of other viruses too, right? Like Hendra virus in Australia, and even maybe even Nipah virus in parts of Southeast Asia. But Middle East respiratory syndrome coronavirus, vaccinate the camels before the camels can give the virus to humans.
One Health. Ben, can you tell us about diagnostic testing for H5N1? Will the current tests work for it?
Sure. So most influenza A assays should be able to detect H5N1 viruses. And if one is running a typing assay, it would be untypable, right? It's not H3 or H1, the currently circulating hemagglutinin genes. So one would need to do an H5 specific PCR in order to identify H5N1 circulating virus. And the WHO has a document that has basically all of the influenza A assays that at least have been collated. I don't know if they're qualified by the WHO, but that is available online. For the US, if one finds untypable influenza A with appropriate epidemiological risk factors, it should be submitted to local public health for evaluation.
Awesome. Thank you. So our next topic starts with a question. This was probably my favorite headline that I found. And so, Ryan, the headline says, "Doctors say this is the most important virus you've never heard of." And you probably know what the answer is. But if you didn't know what the answer is, what would you think the answer was?
As a virologist, I'd be inclined to say Nipah virus.
Yes.
That virus is very significant, poses a very, very, very large threat. But I certainly would not be thinking about human metapneumovirus.
Shh.
I certainly would not be thinking about the one that you're thinking of.
We have a script of questions for a reason. You can't get the answer
well,
right.
It's
okay.
Nipah.
Yes. So I'm sure none of you heard that. But audience, any whoever didn't hear what he just said, what would you think of when you saw this particular headline? Would you think of human metapneumovirus? No. Yeah.
See, I didn't even get that much out.
Well,
I said human.
That's true. Well, that's what the answer is. Human metapneumovirus is the most important virus we haven't heard of per CNN Health. And, pretend you didn't see that. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh my gosh.
Well, Ellie's getting that squared away. Ben, what is your candidate for the most important virus people have not heard of?
Oh, I thought we heard the answer already.
Pretend you don't know.
You get to pick.
Oh, I was going to say Nipah also.
Oh,
we planned that beforehand.
Thank you. Yes. We actually were going to say it in synchrony. Ready? 1, 2, 3, Nipah.
Okay.
We'll do the jokes.
So
we'll do them badly.
So this is from the CDC. So the blue line is PCR positives for metapneumovirus, and then the purple line is antigen positives for human metapneumovirus, which we are going to come back to. But let's see, what was my question? I'm totally lost. So, Alex, this is your question.
For you, Ben. Did you see this trend in your laboratory? And did you know there was an antigen test? Because
Yes.
this came as news to me.
That I was thinking exactly the same thing. So first part of that question, absolutely, we did see a spike in human metapneumovirus cases at our institution, but I had no idea that there was an antigen assay available for this virus. All of our testing is RT-PCR based.
2 editors-in-chief did not know.
Yeah. I was worried. I was like, well, maybe we need to offer this. Do you think we should offer an antigen test?
No.
Lateral flow?
Lateral flow.
You know my feelings on lateral flow.
Yes, I
No go.
do. No go. So let's see. Speaking of human metapneumovirus, we actually have an expert in human metapneumovirus right here on this stage. And it's actually Dr. McAdam, who published a article in the New England Journal of Medicine on human metapneumovirus. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I dabbled. When I was starting out, human metapneumovirus had just been discovered. This was in 2003, 2004. So I did a project looking at human metapneumovirus in samples from Boston Children's Hospital and submitted the paper to New England Journal of Medicine. It was rejected because they took another paper that was far better, but it did get me invited to write the commentary on that paper back in 2004. Since then, I have sadly neglected the virus.
Well, it's too bad because it's really important.
Yeah, it's hot now.
It's a very cool virus from a virologist perspective, though. I mean, never mind. We can talk about this later.
Do you want to talk about turkey rhinotrachea virus?
You have eight minutes.
No,
Go.
I was just going to talk about the infectious cycle of human metapneumovirus.
We are
but
digressing.
Never mind. I guess I'm not allowed to talk.
But, kind of still on this topic, why do you guys think we saw this sort of spike? Ryan, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. I mean, this is an obvious answer, but the conditions were conducive to its emergence and spread. I mean, whatever those factors were, again, obvious answer, but whatever those factors were that lined up for it were great. I don't know if it has something to do with competition with other viruses, perhaps whatever forces that drive those competitions between viruses were conducive to human metapneumovirus ultimately winning out. I mean, we saw the same thing in Indianapolis, just a massive spike in human metapneumovirus. Incidentally, we've seen co-infections with human metapneumovirus and adenovirus and human metapneumovirus and SARS-CoV-2 and a few other things.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Ben, do you know?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, certainly over the last year in this last respiratory virus season, we saw large outbreaks of RSV, very huge numbers of cases of RSV, of influenza A. So perhaps it's this idea of immune deficit, and that this season is unusual because of the lockdowns and so forth that we experienced during COVID times.
Great. Well, thank you both. So in the last few minutes, we're going to play a game.
Oh boy.
It's a fun game. And this is how we're going to introduce it. So they are virology experts.
Well, thank you very much for inviting us on today. Dr. Schmidt
It's
here.
not over. But do you know your punctuation? And some
Absolutely
of you,
not.
as an editor, you should.
Oh, no.
Alex knows his punctuation. And for those of you that have listened to the podcast, we have some ongoing topics of discussion, one of which is punctuation.
Oh boy.
So Alex has put together a few limericks that we're going to see if you guys can answer.
Settle in. This will just take about an hour. Ray, you're going to have to push the next one. So I've got 3 limericks. Get 2 right. You each win a prize. You're working together. You're a team.
Good.
Comma.
You got to let me read it. This is a
sorry.
podcast.
Semicolon.
As opposed to those
Hyphen.
with more glamour,
Ellipsis.
this mark puts up with no drama. It separates phrases with grace that amazes the humble and overused.
Comma.
Excellent.
Yes.
You are 1 for 1.
Wonderful.
Maybe Ben should take the next
No,
one.
I'll defer.
Next.
Other punctuation.
Ellipsis.
Do you guys know how this works? Like the question is read first. And
I'm sorry,
then you
I
give
no.
the answer.
This
We
was
want to
supposed-
talk about viruses.
This was supposed to be the hard one. I'm going to read it anyway because I spent a full 15 minutes on these.
Okay.
Other punctuation this eclipses. At the end of a sentence, it affixes. When speech trails off, there's no need to scoff. Just use 3 dots, the...
Ellipsis.
Now, only Ben can address the next one.
Okay.
All right, Ryan?
Oh dear.
That's fine.
We already got-
Can I
Can you shut off power to...
We
Ryan's
already
mic?
got 2 right.
That's okay. I can
so-
talk.
You got 2. Let's
Yeah.
see if
So
you
I
can
want
help.
one of those.
I got something better for you. When 2 sentences need Lincoln, This punctuation is all in. It also exists to organize lists. Elli's favorite, the...
Clearly,
I
you
can't
have
say
not
anything.
listened to the podcast.
I have not listened to the. I'm sorry.
All right, over to you, Ryan. Well, let's throw it to the audience.
Okay, go. Audience.
To the audience. Not hyphen. Close.
Semicolon.
Semicolon.
Oh, I love the semicolon.
Yep.
Excellent work.
I don't
This-
know if we can be friends.
The semicolon is Ellie's least favorite punctuation
I
mark.
love the
Semicolon.
semicolon.
Does
Yeah.
it rhyme with Lincoln?
And when you're using
No, and in fact, I switched the two lines. I had to flip the two lines because all in is a closer rhyme.
I love the semicolon.
Oh, I
like
see.
whenever you include the word however and although and whatnot in a sentence, semicolon, however, comma, rest of the
We are brothers, separated
right.
at birth.
I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm about
All
to
right.
walk off.
Well, I have a prize for each
Brian
of you.
used to shake his head at me about stuff like this. He was just like, "Really, man?"
First, I have a little something for Ellie. For those who are listening, this is a mug with a...
Semicolon.
Isn't it beautiful?
Oh, that's
Beautiful.
amazing.
You
Yeah.
know, it is more beautiful than a mug with the acronym AST on it.
Man, we got a lot
This
to
is
do.
beautiful. Thank you.
Ben, I don't know if you can wear this. This is a custom lanyard
Oh,
that says nothing good happens after 40 cycles.
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
JCM.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. That's awesome.
Ryan, one for you.
oh, thank you so much. I love it.
And
Oh, just all sorts of things.
anyone in the
Oh,
audience who
yay.
wants one afterwards, I have them for all of us. You get a lanyard. You get a lanyard.
So Dr. Drew Bell back there needs a lanyard also. He, former trainee of ours. Oh, and Amanda Harrington wants a lanyard as well.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for
Thank you.
agreeing to come up here and talk to us and teach us all about your expertise in virology. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and listening. And you can listen to this episode one more time. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.